Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is the Paddy Power, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather, or the gym.
Hello and welcome to this Monday Postcast. I'm Maddie Plale. I'm joined in the studio, a rare studio appearance from Lewis Porteous. We've also got Tom Siegel on the line and Neil Ryan from Paddy Power as well. To start off in this first segment, we're just going to look back on what was a brilliant July festival. But first off, Lewis, get up to anything interesting over the weekend?
Mainly just watching the great racing, really. There was just so much on offer on Saturday. Obviously the World Cup final Sunday, Wimbledon. And it's just a sporting feast, wasn't it?
Did anyone watch Wimbledon this year? I didn't watch any of it due to football and racing and everything.
I sort of tuned into it for the first time at the weekend, but yeah, I didn't know who was in the finals till I actually got there. But it's a good spectacle. And the semi-finals actually on Friday were epics.
Well, they're still going on, aren't they?
Yeah, wasn't there a match that went on for like a record?
26-24 it was in the last.
Blimey. Anyway, Tom, how was your weekend?
Good. Umpiring lots of cricket matches for my son, Maddie, and similar to Lewis, watching lots of football and racing and golf and all sorts of funny things.
Sounds like the dream. And you, Neil, finally?
Yeah, same thing, just watching the sport. The missus had the remote though, so there's a couple of fights going on about switching between the tennis and the racing. So.
Not Love Island, please, not Love Island.
No, at least it wasn't Love Island, but yeah, had to watch a few replays again there on yesterday evening, but we got there.
Okie dokie. Well, we're going to look back at the July Cup first off. Brilliant race. Before we give our 2 cents on what happened, let's hear what Nick Watts had to say on last week's Postcast.
I just want to see him roll. Just want to see him break early, get out in front, and just run these ragged. And it's going to be easier said than done. But I'm sure those are going to be the tactics. He's very, very effective on fast ground. So again, he's another one that this long hot summer is absolutely perfect for him.
He was, of course, talking about US Navy flag, and although he drifted quite markedly in the betting beforehand, he did indeed get the job done. Lewis, what was your initial reaction to it? Were you surprised?
Not so much surprised when you go back and see he's a middle part winner, a US winner, a cracking 2-year-old. Just running out of steam in those mile races. It was a huge surprise. I thought it was a pretty dominant performance, so I must admit, once he were out in front, they never really looked like they were going to get him. The funny thing is now we might never ever see him again in Britain or Ireland. He's potentially off to the Everest, and if he wins that, I mean, you couldn't put a value on him as a dual hemisphere stallion. It's a fair play for them for having a go at it, but on the day I thought he was pretty dominant, to be honest, Maddie. Yeah,
he was pulling away from them at the end. Neil, have we got any prices on US Navy flag for the Everest?
He's 8-1. Trapeze Artist is 7-2-5 and Red Sill at 9-2, and then we have US Navy flag at 8.
Okay, there we go. Tom, what did you make of US Navy flag? You couldn't have him whatsoever beforehand, could you?
Thanks for that, Maddie. No, I couldn't. Good job you didn't put my bid up from last week. Blimey, that would be embarrassing.
We embarrassed you the week before with your rant.
I didn't fancy him at all. There was 2 things. There was one, first of all, it was the price, but 2, I thought he was doing something completely different. But, you know, they've done it so many times before. I'm just not a fan of the horse. But he was excellent, wasn't he? I mean, the time wasn't great, and the horses behind him were sort of a little bit of a mishmash bunch, sort of not the ones you expected. So I think he'd struggle against an in-form, you know, Harry Angel or a Batash or a horse like that. But if he's going down to Australia, I think he'd probably run really well, wouldn't he? It's round a bend, I think, if I remember rightly.
It's round a bend. And they've got a good hold on with Merchant Navy, obviously. He was one of the top Aussie sprinters in the camp, and Red Coat Warrior hasn't exactly set the world alight over here, so they're entitled to go and have a go, aren't they?
Very much so, very much so. And look, he's clearly a sprinter, isn't he? And, you know, Hayden Brown can do anything, really. So, yeah, why not? Looks good, doesn't he?
Yeah, I was quite impressed by him. Neil, any thoughts particularly on the July Cup? Any horses from in behind that you were looking at for future races or anything like that?
Yeah, there's nothing else to touch on with US Navy flag. I was obviously very disappointed with Blue Point. Last time I was on, I put him up for the race at Newmarket, but he's 8 or 10 pounds better there. At Ascot. The one that really caught my eye was Seals Nation. He was a huge prize at 25-1 for a horse who was fave in the Commonwealth. Obviously ran no race there, but he slightly missed a break and might have been slightly intentional by Shamey. He's held up, and he definitely, if you look back at it, he travelled the best through the race. Couldn't really get a gap, and when Shamey pulled him out into the rail, he just didn't really pick up. I just don't think he actually saw it the 6 furlongs, and O'Brien came out afterwards and said that he'll be going back to 5. And a 12-1 for the Nunthorpe. I think he's probably a good each way bet there.
Couldn't agree more, Neil.
What
He
a
doesn't stay
cracking-
6 furlongs. He simply doesn't stay 6 furlongs. I think he won the Group 1 last year, but he was at the end of his tether, and all along they've said he was a really, really fast horse, and I think 5 furlongs is the making of him. Whether he's quite fast enough to beat Blue Point and Batash, I don't know, but he's definitely a 5 furlong horse.
Do you think he's value for the Nunthorpe, Tom?
I don't think anything's value for any race at York these days, to be honest, Maddie. So no, probably not. But we'll see what happens on the day. I mean, it'll be if he's drawn next to Harry Angel and Blue Point and Batash, it gives him a better chance, doesn't it? But at this stage, I think you keep your powder dry at that price.
Okay, well, the Albany Stakes form was put to the test in the Duchess of Cambridge Stakes. Pretty Pollyanna, she stormed away from the field. Frankie Dettori, he had his ban, of course, he's going to appeal that now. But she was made, I think she was made 16-1 for the 1,000 guineas next year. Is that right, Neil?
Well, the betting is
20s.
we're 14s on Goddess, 14s on Pretty Pollyanna, and 16s on Main Edition. But yeah, I do think there's 16s out there in Pretty Pollyanna.
I was going to mention Goddess as well. Both of them, of course, classic candidates. But first off, Lewis, Pretty Pollyanna for you. You couldn't help but be impressed from that step she took forward from Royal Ascot, could you?
It was visually, it was incredibly impressive. I just see that the ratings boys today have given her 112 on the Racing Post ratings, which is no filly over 6 furlongs before August in the past decades has registered such a figure like that. So it was seriously impressive. Looking ahead to classics, I'd be a little concerned about the mile at this stage, but there's a lot of water going to the bridge, and crikey, she put them lot to bed.
That's an impressive stat. Tom, were you impressed with Pretty Pollyanna?
Yeah, she was really good, wasn't she? I mean, only a few weeks ago we were talking about Calix winning by so far and then she beat 7 and 6, wasn't he? She won by 7 and 6 back to the third. So yeah, obviously there was some scrimmaging in behind, and she might not have won by that far without that. But she was going to win by miles anyway. And they're the best fillies we got. You know, you got Gossamer Wings, who was beating a short head in the Queen Mary, and you got Main Edition in there who won the Albany. So she beat them by miles, didn't she? She's got to be the best around at the moment. And like Lewis said there, the pedigree is the interesting thing. Also, on the dam side, there's good bit mount in it that makes you think she'll get a mile, and she wasn't stopping. I mean, Sylvester set her alight a long way out, didn't she? And she kept going. 7 certainly won't be a problem, and I think she'll stay a mile myself. I think she's the one at the moment that makes most appeal in the Guineas market for sure.
Neil, did you get much of a sort of instant reaction when you first put her up? Did you have to cut her again afterwards for the Guineas, or?
Yeah, we originally went up higher and we cut her again. I just think Michael Bell's interview at the end after the race was just telling. He was pretty much in shock. His eyebrows were up in the sky after the performance, so he was impressed by her. She obviously came on a lot. Said the next race for her is probably the Group 2 Louder. There's a Group 1 in the Curragh, so could even run in both. So it'll be interesting to see what she does next time out. At the prices, though, or even if you were to have a bet now, I'd be more in favour of Goddess after a run on Thursday in the Curragh. I know she mightn't have beaten much, but like Camelot Filly to win by 10 lengths, hard held over 7 furlongs, was something special. And Shamie Heffernan, he's normally quite quiet, he just gets on with his business, but after the race he said she's definitely special and definitely better than September. So that's pretty telling, I'd have to say. Next up is the Silver Flash Stakes for her on the July 26th at Curragh.
Brilliant, yeah, I've got to admit I was hugely taken by Goddess. She was the biggest eye catcher I think you could have ever seen on debut, and then to do what she did at Leopardstown, I think she's a real good solid favourite for the 1,000 guineas at this stage, as you can have. Tom, did you watch her race?
Yeah, saw Goddess, she was really good, wasn't she? Actually, I don't know if anyone saw the Colt win yesterday, but I was more impressed with him actually. Anthony Van Dyke, his name was, who won at Killarney yesterday.
That was serious, wasn't it?
I thought he was really, it's hard track Killarney to do what he did. He made up a lot of ground. It's very much a front runner's track, I always find, and I thought he did really well to do what he did and win by 7 or 8. He's a very well bred horse too, and if you like Goddess, go and have a look at Anthony Van Dyke yesterday, because I thought he was just as good.
Neil, have you priced Anthony Van Dyke up for anything?
I didn't see him in the Derby betting actually. I was meant to refresh it there this morning, but no, I hadn't seen him at that stage. I'll have a quick look, maybe just go on to something else.
Yeah, we'll go on to Lewis. Lewis, did you see Goddess's run or even Anthony Van Dyke's win yesterday?
Yeah, I saw them both. Did a little report on Goddess's performance. She was awesome. I mean, when you're trying to stack up against the group races at Newmarket, it's not easy, but it's just so much potential there, wasn't there? And I agree with Tom. Yesterday's horse at Killarney, crikey, he did look special.
Do you think people can get a bit carried away with these sort of Aidan O'Brien horses winning, lower graded races, or do you think, it's inevitable that he's going to have the sort of the hand when it comes to these big races?
But you look at the pedigree and what's gone into them, it backs up that hype, if you like. And as Neil said, with someone like Shamie Heffernan is bigging up a horse, I think you can, safely say that it is the real deal. But I think it's fair enough. If any horse wins a maiden by 5 lengths and upwards, they should get a little bit of hype.
Yeah.
The thing is, Maddie, and Lewis spot on there. It's so hierarchical racing now, isn't it? It's all about stallions. It's all about who's got the best horses. Aidan O'Brien, whatever anyone says, is going to have 5 or 6 Group 1 winning 3-year-old colts next year, isn't he? He's just going to have them. And John Gosden might have 1 or 2. Trying to think of someone else having one, it's going to be atypical, isn't it? Because they're not going to have Galileos and Deep Impacts and Camelots in the amount that Aidan O'Brien has. So he's got everything. He's got numbers stacked in his favour. So if you can land on, or if Goddess is his best 2-year-old filly, then 16-1 is a massive price. If Anthony Van Dyke is his Derby horse, it's a massive price. The problem is he's got 20 of them, hasn't he? So we tried to predict which one's the best, but I think what things have shown recently, like Alpha Centauri, who will come on later, is that horses that are running now are at an advantage to the ones that are held back for later on. The reason horses are held back for later on is because they're not ready. They're not quite good enough. They're not showing enough. The horses that are running now tend to be the best ones these days. Aidan O'Brien gets them out. John Gosden gets them out. Do you see what I mean? And consequently, the horses that are running now perhaps are too big a price simply because people are expecting others to come into the equation. Now, of course, others are going to come in. But that doesn't stop Goddess or Pretty Pollyanna or Dick Van Dyke or whatever his name is being the best one, does it? It simply doesn't. So if they happened, I don't see any issue with having a crack at them now, because you can have 2 or 3, can't you? You can have 2 or 3 Goddesses, 2 or 3 Anthony Van Dykes, and your likelihood then is you're going to find the right one.
Very true. Have we got that price now, Neil?
We actually, there's no Derby betting up and it's not in for the Guineas, so I actually thought, unlike Tom, I actually thought maybe he looked like he needed further, but I get what he's saying on the breeding side. Looked like a Derby horse or even a Ledger horse to me, but no, we don't have a price up yet, unfortunately.
Okay.
What do we think of Frankie's ban?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because they weren't sure whether they were going to contest it, were they, Lewis? But then now it's announced that he is.
Oh, they're definitely contested potentially on Thursday. That'll be. I've got to say, I thought it was right, the decision. I thought it was up the upper end. If it had been in Australia, it would have been 3 weeks. You saw the French jockey in America getting 15 days for an incident after the line. For me, I thought it was the right decision. I don't know what the lads think.
Yeah. Tom, what were your thoughts on the incident?
To be honest, I thought it was a bit harsh, and I'll tell you the reason why. I thought that the winner was leaning into. I think Pretty Pollyanna lent into Angel's Hideaway, and Frankie sort of switched to the inside, picked up his stick once and hit her once, and she sort of made a dart for the rail, didn't she? I don't think he was expecting her to do that, and I think the fact that she got lent on sort of encouraged her to go that way more than she would have done in any normal situation. I don't think he deliberately thought, Of course he didn't deliberately do what he did, but I think there was extenuating circumstances that made it look worse than it actually was.
Okay. And Neil, what did you think?
Yeah, as Tom said, Pretty Pollyanna just kind of moved across her, and Frankie is like, as soon as she started moving to her right, he put down his whip, tried to straighten her up. But yeah, like, it could have been a really bad incident. I think if it's in a different country, if he is in Australia, he's going to get a longer ban than the 10 days. But yeah, he definitely will appeal, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, because he's missing out on some big rides.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'd be with you, Lewis. I think it could have been a whole lot worse. It was a really horrible incident. We'll move on anyway to the star of the show. Once again, Alpha Centauri. She was brilliant in the Falmouth Stakes. The Jack Lamawa, I believe, is going to be next. She's going to take on the Colts. Tom, can any horse beat Alpha Centauri over a mile at the minute?
Not at the minute, I don't think. No, I mean, especially in the year we're in, I don't think there's a standout 3-year-old colt over the trip. I think I think Without Parole's the one, isn't it? And he's got more potential to improve. I don't think we saw the best of him, but the form's not great, is it? We saw what happened to Gustav Klimt in the Jean Prat, so you can't literally put Without Parole down as a brilliant horse on form. I think he might be better than he showed, but no, I think she was exceptionally good. Again, I loved the simplicity of it. I was
going to say, what did you make of the tactics? Because I don't think most people were expecting it.
I thought it was so refreshing. I'm just doing that for my Weekender column this year. I thought it was so refreshing that the jockey just was drawn on the rail, went on the rail, made the running, didn't do anything complicated, didn't switch, didn't do this. So often we see horses drawn here, going in the middle, going all over the place, trying to do this, trying to do that. He just kept it completely simple on the best horse. I thought it was nothing, was it? He didn't have to do anything, and the best filly won. I just thought it was nice that Colin O'Donoghue and Jesse Harrington just said, get out there, win, go home, pick up the prize money, and let's have a beer or whatever they did. And that was as simple as that, wasn't it? So often they overcomplicate it. We all do, don't we?
Yep.
We try and make things more tricky than they actually are, and I thought it was just nice to watch.
Did you agree?
Yeah, it's great words there from Tom. It's spot on. He knows he's on the best horse. You do not need to add something into the equation that's going to potentially get a beat or complicate things. Get out there, and whereas Ascot was at electric turn of foot, this was just control, aggression. It crushed him early. Just great. It was like a piece of work. It was great to watch. It's just what the meeting needed and what the season needs, really. She looks like a star mile. I'd love to see her up against the boys.
Neil, what was your reaction to Alpha Centauri's win? Have you got any prices on the Jack Lamar?
Yeah, so the Jack Lamar, she's 5-4-5. Resalitos is 7-2. Cascadian is 9-2, and Almeida 6-1 and 9-1 bar. And then for the Breeders' Cup Mile, she's a 5-1-5, backed in from 8s, and Without Parole is 6s, Lancaster Bomber 8s, and Rhododendron 10s. There's not too much to add on what's been said there. Like her third Group 1 in 7 weeks. Obviously, she does need top of the ground. She just reminded me of her dad, Master Craftsman, just kind of puts her head out, gets to her work, battles on. She's obviously probably got more, or she definitely has more ability than Master Craftsman, which is saying a lot. Jesse came out at the end of the race and said that the Deval, the Jack Lamar is next up, and obviously her owners are the Nearchises who love the Breeders' Cup, so there's a very good chance that she will end up there at the end of the season. I'm just add to that. Sorry, I'm just really disappointed with Clemmy. From last year, she looked like the monster, and she just hasn't really seemed to train on. She just seemed almost one pace. I think they'll struggle to win another Group 1 with her. Do
you think they'll do a US Navy flag and drop her right back? Seeing as 6 Villains was where she was making hay last season.
Yeah, perhaps.
I don't think she's. I don't like her at all. I thought when I saw her in the telly and I saw her in the paddock at Ascot, I thought she hadn't done anything at all, and I don't like her as a prospect going forward. As a 2-year-old, I'd be against her every time she runs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on to the Bunbury Cup now. The quote I enjoyed most reading from the weekend was probably Roger Fells saying that he was screaming at the TV in his underpants watching Burnt Sugar win because he was about to go on holiday.
2 of us.
Sorry?
That makes 2 of us. I was so gutted. I was, get back.
But no, I think he's around 16-1 for the Gigaset International Handicap at Ascot now. Neil, is that right?
That is, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and he was quite impressive in the end, wasn't he, Burnt Sugar? Competitive handicap, and he made it look pretty easy, Lewis.
I wasn't winning out of turn, real 7 furlong specialist. The gaps came and he took it up. Yeah, there were good quotes from Fell, like you said. The horse I'd take out of the race is Firmament, who I think he was 5th. He's been in my chocker for God knows how long, but he'll be going for that Clipper Logistics 7 furlong race at York that he won 2 years ago, and he was a good third last year of 109. He's £10 lower now, loves York. So Firmament, he was sort of went for the same gap as Burnt Sugar. Burnt Sugar got there first, and he always travelled well without having any daylight, and he sort of didn't really come off the bridle that much. But so I just thought the Clipper Logistics race at York is the one for Firmament.
I backed him, and I think, as you say, he's dropping down the handicap, but he travels so well in his races, so I think there could well be another one in him. Tom, you were chuffed with Burnt Sugar, were you?
No, gutted.
No, gutted. Sorry.
Backed him in the Hunt Cup, backed him in the Victoria Cup. and being the contrarian that I am, didn't back him in the race that suited him best. There we go. That's my, it's my
He was well backed though, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, and no, every right
well
to be, because he's such a good horse. If you watch the Victoria Cup and the Hunt Cup, nothing travelled better in either race. Nothing travelled better. He's a 6-year-old. Now, unlike Roger Fell, I was in my boxers, not my underpants, but there we go. I'm more of a modern man than him. But I thought Spanish City was the eye catcher. I thought he should have won, and I know I'm speaking through my pocket because I had a few quid on him, but I thought he went to the he made his effort far too prematurely. If you look at it, he took it up 2 furlongs out, and I think it was set up for a finish of the race, and I thought he did really well to stick on into second. And if they ran the race again, I think Jack Mitchell would ride a totally different race and he would win.
Okie dokie. Let's try and get some more covered. So we'll talk about the Superlative Stakes and the July Stakes, of course. Quarto and Advertise winning both of them. I think they're both likely to go to Ireland for the National Stakes for Quarto and the Phoenix for Advertise. Tom, we've spoke about the crops of the 2-year-olds and the fillies and the colts and how they compare at this stage. What did you make of those two performances? Did they sort of give you a bit more hope going forward that they're a really good bunch?
I like the 2-year-olds. I think the 2-year-old colts are very good. Yeah, I think Calix is good. I think Quarto, you can't knock what he did. I don't think the time was anything extraordinary, but I think winning in the style he did, and he looked very strong at the finishes. Dan was an Oaks win, an Oaks placed in the Oaks, was placed in the Oaks, and so he's going to get a lot further. Personally, I didn't love his cadence and the way he carried himself. I think the ground was quite heavily watered, and I think that played into his hands. I'd be worried about him on fast ground. His head was a bit in the air, and a lot of Dubarwi's a little bit better with cutting the ground. So if it got really firm for a Newmarket Guineas or a Newmarket Dewhurst, I'd be slightly worried about him, but he's clearly very talented. But I love Advertise. I thought he did really well again. He looked like he won with loads up his sleeve. I think they think that he'll be better over a step up in trip. I personally not so sure. I thought he got to the front plenty.
Well, they said they're gonna step him up in trip, but they're gonna hold off until after the Curragh, aren't they?
Well, they should, because at the moment, looking at the Coolmore or the Ballydoyle 6 furlong horses, they don't seem to have a superstar over 6 furlongs. The Van Beethovens and I suppose Sergei Prokofiev will go there, and that'll be the acid test. But he beat him at Ascot, and I don't see any reason why I can't beat him again.
Okay, Neil, and how did the market react to those victories?
Yeah, so just for the guineas now, we are 5-1 Fav. Calix, Sergei Prokofiev has 14s, and we have Advertise of 14s and Quarto at 16-1. Just to kind of second, I think Advertise is probably beaten more. Quarto was obviously very impressive. Again, Appleby was very surprised in his interview afterwards. There's a form line there, and I'm hoping to give listeners 2 absolute certs unless they run against each other next time out. Was Quarto beat Handmaiden, who's a highly thought of horse out of Gosden Yard, who actually came second by neck in a maiden there on Thursday. And if you look back at that race, Roger Varian trained Your Time Is Now. It was first time out in track. He travelled so well through the race, but just didn't quite get quicken up. And similarly, in the same race, the Brian Mean trained Noé Jose, who's out of No Nay Never. He just travelled all over the winner, but Crowley just couldn't get a gap in time. Just looking back at that maiden, I know they weren't too spread out. I just think it's going to be very strong, and I just think they're 2 certain winners next time out.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we asked for on the Postcast. Any other thoughts from the July Festival, Lewis?
I like that Neverland Rock that finished the 2.
I backed him as well.
Did you?
Yeah. Drop back in trip needed for him maybe, because he travelled all over them, didn't he? But he just didn't pick up.
Exactly. It was in that quarter race, wasn't it? It looks like 6 furlongs. If Goodwood didn't come too soon, that speed track there would really suit him. Just travel like a good horse, one for the tracker.
Okie doke. Tom?
First Contact, who won a handicap on the Saturday. For Godolphin off top weight. I thought he was really impressive. He beat Curiosity and Argentello, who'd all won lots of races recently, very well. Curiosity was second in the Britannia, and First Contact gave him a good few pounds and thrashed him. So he'd be one. He's definitely got to be a group horse, him. And there's 2 others, though, that I've got to mention. They didn't run at Newmarket. They ran at Ascot and at York. They're 2 Owen Burrows
El Wazir.
horses. El Wazir and Wadil Safa.
Yeah.
I thought they were both incredibly impressive and have to be group class horses of the future.
There we go. What more could you want? We'll come back in just a moment to talk about the Irish Oaks on Saturday and other big races upcoming this week.
Success ain't earned, it's bought. That's why at Paddy Power, we paid the big bucks for the best tech nerds in the world to develop our new, fastest ever app. Download the new app from the App Store or Play Store now. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Welcome back to this Monday Postcast. We've reviewed the Newmarket July meeting and now we're going to talk about some of the big races upcoming this week. But prior to that, just want to give a mention to the Derby winner Massar. He's not going to be retired, but he is no longer going to race on this season due to an injury that kept him out of the Coral Eclipse. Lewis, first off, how did you rate Massar, and were you surprised that they weren't going to go straight to stud with him? Because it's quite rare that you'd have that sort of scenario these days, isn't it? I
don't know if it's that rare, and sort of Godolphin usually are up for the challenge when they get a good one. I thought he looked really good in the Derby. The joy was still a little bit out for me, and I was looking forward to seeing him again, which is a shame, but it sounds like it's soft tissue damage, potentially not that serious, and they're committing to coming back next season, so I'll be looking forward to seeing him again then.
Yeah, and Tom, how did you rate Massar?
I think he's exceptional, Maddie. I thought that he probably should have been a Guineas and Derby winner. I think he got unlucky. I think both him and Roaring Lion were drawn out of the Guineas. If you look back, they were drawn away from all the action. The two of them raced on their own down the near side. I think time has shown that they're better than Saxon Warrior, both of them. So I think they were unlucky. And if we'd have been talking about a Guineas and a Derby winner, I think we'd be talking about a real proper top-notcher. It's a shame. I think he'll come back, and I'm expecting him to win the King George next year.
So trip-wise, would you stay at 1.5 miles with him? Where do you expect them to campaign
I think
him?
they'll run 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles. No problem either trip.
Okay. And Neil, any thoughts on Massar being out for the season?
Yeah, it's just a disappointment to see who actually was the better horse between Roaring Lion and Massar. I think Roaring Lion is definitely improving and showed that, and it just would have been great to see another matchup possibly in the Juddmonte, but it's not going to take place. But yeah, it's great to see that Godolphin are keeping him in training, and just that they're still continuing to take on Coolmore, and with the rise in Appleby and the success that he's shown, particularly in the last 2 years, it's just good to see he's staying in training.
Here, very true. You mentioned Coolmore there. Of course, Kew Gardens won the Juddmonte Grand Prix de Longchamp, and he's now, I think, 8-1 for the King George. Neil, is that right?
He's 10-3 favourite now for the King George, with Latrobe at 5. Sorry, for the St Leger, he's 10-3. Vav, Latrobe is 5-1. Forever Together 8-1, and Wells Fargo, Tom's tip last week, is 10s.
Okay, Tom, now you're always very keen on these 3-year-olds in company and in races like the King George. Have you had a bet on Kew Gardens?
Luckily enough, I have a bet at a very big price on Kew Gardens, Maddie. It was a bit of guesswork, but when I did my price-wise column for the Racing Post, Kew Gardens was one of my selections at about 50-1 or something. I think it was then. Now, there was a lot of guesswork involved, and I had no idea he was going to run, but I was impressed with him in the Queen's Vase. I thought Calix, Alpha Centauri and him were the three most visually impressive performances at Royal Ascot, and he did back it up in the Grand Prix de Paris. Now, I don't know how good the form was, and the race was set up for him to win, but I think if you watch the race again, I think he was going to win by a long way, and the French horse lent on him just coming into the final furlong, knocked him off his stride, and he took a bit of time to gather himself again and get up. Now, whether he's good enough, whether he's as normally for a 3-year-old to win this, they have to be extremely good. They have to be a Derby winner or an Oaks winner like an Abel, or going back Lamtara or whatever, Tagruda, all those ones. They have to be exceptional. I don't know that he's as good as them, but what he does do is get a lot of weight. I'm a little bit against Crystal Ocean. I think he's an overrated horse, but I do like Poet's Word, and I think that an in-form top class Poet's Word might beat Kew Gardens. But at
the price you're on.
About the price, I don't care. I also think you've got to throw in Waldgeist and Coronet. I think they're both going to run. I think it was interesting that Andre Fabre said at the weekend that Waldgeist was going to run. His jockey, who got that 15-day ban that we were talking about in America.
Yeah, Charles Boudot.
Correct. Has you're allowed to book a day off in that if there's a Group 1 race, and he booked off Ascot for the King George. So obviously the plan is for Waldgeist to come over. I like him as a horse, and therefore it's not going to be easy for Kew Gardens, but he's a 3-year-old. He's getting lots of weight.
What did you make of Kew Gardens' win, and would you fancy him in the King George against his olders?
Well, I think the King George, it's definitely a year where you've got to be having a go at it. You've got Chris Ocean, who's not yet a Group 1 winner. You've got Poet's Word, potentially better at 10 furlongs. I just think this Kew Gardens is improving quickly. And when Ballydoyle horse gets on a roll like that, there's no saying where it can stop. And just going, emphasising what Tom said about the weight, £11 from older colts and geldings you'll get, and £8 from fillies that are 4-year-old and older. It's a huge weight allowance. And he is the one going in there with that on an upwards profile. Wolgeist would be the danger for me. But crikey, this Kew Gardens, from looking exposed in sort of Group 3 company to then winning the Queen's Vase, and he's just on such a roll now.
Would you back him?
Probably not at that price now.
Not at that price now, but I bet you want to get some of Tom's bet. We all want to be on there, have a bit of what Tom got. Neil, thoughts on Kew Gardens? Are you a fan?
Yeah, we're a big fan here. We're actually pretty shortest in the market. We're 9-2. There is 6-2 out there. The guys touched on Poet's Word, maybe better off over 10, but 15-8 Fav, Crystal Ocean, who I can't have at all at 2-1. I just wasn't impressed by his run at last time out at all. Coronet at 8s and Cracksman at 9s, who doesn't look like a run there. Yeah, I couldn't have been more impressed at the weekend. He just quickened really well. It doesn't look like he needs a gallop. He actually just quickened nicely around the bend, had to go a little bit wide. And actually the second horse, the trainer came out and said he's aiming towards the arc, so they obviously think a lot of him as well. So a lot of positives there for sure.
Okay, if we move on now to the Irish Oaks, which is on Saturday, Neil, what prices have we got on that? Horses hoping to emulate Enable, who ran away with it last year.
Yeah, so we have Magic Wand at 5-2, Sea of Class is 7-2, Lawrence is 5-1, Forever Together 6-1, and Latidar 9-1 and 10-1 bar. Okay,
Tom, you a big Magic Wand fan?
Love her, yeah. I think she is the best middle distance horse in the O'Brien yard. Better than the Colts, better than Forever Together, and I think she's got everything going for her, apart from the fact that she's a really good race, isn't it? You got Lawrence in there, and you got Sea of Class, and you got Forever Together.
I don't think Lawrence is going to go. I think she's going to go Yorkshire Oaks, but that is a shame.
That is a real shame, because if she ran, it would be the best race, the best middle distance race of the season so far, in my opinion. I love her. I think she'll win. I think the key to her is the ground. I was incredibly impressed with her at Royal Ascot, and I think she'll beat Forever Together this time, for sure.
Okay. Any additional thoughts, Lewis?
Big fan of Sea of Class. She's not got the form in the butt like those fillies Tom mentioned, but I do love the way she's been campaigned. It must have been hard to sidestep Epsom, but they did that. She had a confidence booster in another listed race at Newbury. The first listed race she won, she beat Athena, who's won in America.
Yep.
I like William Aggis when he's got a plan. I just think there's no better trainer for pulling it off. And he said for a long time, the Irish Oaks, and she's just got a little bit of something about it that catches the imagination. I think she could be well up to this sort of Group 1 level. Time will tell us.
Okay, Neil. So 1 vote for Magic Wand, 1 for Sea of Class. Which camp are you in?
Depending on the ground, we had a little bit of rain yesterday, not a huge amount. If there was a little bit of juice in the ground, I'd be tempted by Forever Together each way. But yeah, if it stays good or good to firm, I'm all over Magic Wand. She just moves beautifully over the good ground. With my money in my head, basically thinking about Shanaza, I backed Shanaza before the French Oaks at triple figure prices on the exchange for the Arc. I'm hoping it rains, she comes over, wins, shortens and goes to the Arc, but I don't see it happening at this stage. So
well, we'll hope she runs a good race anyway, if she does indeed go. We've mentioned the Irish Oaks now. That was fairly quickly summed up by the lads. We'll take a quick break and then we'll come back to preview a decent race at Leopardstown.
Check out Paddy's Rewards Club. Simply place 5 bets of £10 or more across any sport in a week and you'll get a free £10 bet the next week. T&Cs apply. 18+. BeGambleAware.org.
Welcome back to this Monday Postcast and the final instalment of it. We're going to cover the Meld Stakes at Leopardstown, 7:15 on Thursday. A whole host of runners in this. Most eye-catching entry probably Hazapur, who was 5th in the Derby last time. I don't think you'll have any betting on this just yet, Neil, but have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, not betting just yet, Donny. Entry just came out there about half an hour ago. But yeah, I think, as you said, Hazapur is the interesting one. ran a good race in the Derby. Dermot Well just came out and said, look, he didn't stay the trip. Had Delano Roosevelt, the Pentagon, Nelson, who are all decent yardsticks behind him in the Derrystown Derby trial. And Well definitely thinks a lot of him, and it's just interesting to see him now drop back in trip.
Okay, Lewis, anything to add?
I saw the fascinating entry for me was that Riven Light. Willie
Right.
Mullins also went over to Australia last year. They were on about taking on Winks in the Cox Plate, but he got injured in the prep run over there. Not been seen since, but he looked a serious horse before that. And if he was to stand his ground, I look forward to seeing him back. But no great idea of maybe winners at this stage.
Okay, interesting point nevertheless. Tom, you said Aidan O'Brien's got loads in this. What would be your number one?
On form, Deauville, but he's a little bit disappointing. I do think that dropping back into Grade 3 company, is it? Group 3 company gives him a much better chance than what he's been running in. Pretty good horse, pretty good form, might be too big a price, but it's all about Hazapur really. If he runs up to the level that we saw him running in the Derby, I think he'll win.
Okay, we'll go to Newbury now, and the 3 o'clock, this is on Saturday, is the Bet365 Hackwood Stakes Group 3. Some Royal Ascot form coming to the table here. We see Bacchus, who won the Woking, of course, and plenty of these ran the Commonwealth Cup as well, and Blazoned, Hay Jonesy, etc. Neil, I'll go to you first again. Any strong thoughts on this one?
I first had a look at projection. He was only 2.5 lengths behind Merchant Navy at Ascot, but then when you look at the 4 and closer, all his good form is at Ascot, so it just makes me wonder if he's a one-track pony. I came back to Equilateral, who Frank Hickey was all over at a big price and tipped it up for the Commonwealth, who just ran no race, but the trainers come out and said how he scoped badly. And I just think he might be a decent price, and it'd be worth taking a shot on the ability he showed in the race prior to that.
Okay, Equilateral for Neil. Tom, any thoughts on the Hackwood?
If Equilateral is a big price, which I don't think he'll ever be ever again, I would be interested in him. I think he'll be a short price because of all the hype about him. I personally thought Emblazoned was the most likely winner of this. I thought he really impressed. Now, the form's not great of the Commonwealth Cup. We saw Ecuador and Emblazoned, Sansamali, well stuffed in the thing, but Fleet Review ran very well, didn't he? And Sioux Nation ran very well, so maybe it was a bit of a topsy-turvy race. Maybe it was about the way things happened rather than the form of the horses, and Emblazoned certainly looked a good horse to me because he made the running nearly. He was in front 4 furlongs out, and all those around him came from much further back. I think Newbury might suit him better, but I think if he's drawn up in the middle there, which seems to be an advantage these days, I'd fancy Emblazoned to beat the older horses.
Over to you, Lewis.
I'll take Projection over the younger brigade. He's got form behind Tin Man, Brando, Blue Point. It goes on back to Group 3 level. I think it's a good opportunity for him.
Okay, nicely wrapped up. Over to the 3:35, the Weatherby Super Sprint. Now, this is just an absolute nightmare to get into at this stage, but is there any horse that you've been lining up for this or thinking of this race in mind, Lewis, this so far this season?
I wouldn't say I've been lining it up, but looking at the weights, Queen and Bermuda would get in there off 8-3 if she's declared. She was 11-2 favourite for the Windsor Castle. Didn't run to her form, but before that she looked like a seriously speedy filly, and it's just sort of a race that could suit her, but it's early days and it is a lottery. It's a tricky one to weigh up.
Exactly that, it is early days. That in mind, Tom, any thoughts?
Well, I don't know if Carl Burke's filly's going to run Little Kim, but I thought she had the best form, actually. I thought she had not beaten far in the Queen Mary, and then she went off to France and beat Chelsea Cloisters and a few others in a Group 3 at Deauville. Now, she has to give £6 to Lewis's filly there, Queen of Bermuda, and I'm not... She's a bit in and out whether she can do it. How could I forget the actual Queen Mary winner, Signora Cabello? If she runs, then obviously she's right in there too. But she too has to give 9. She has to give more weight to Queen of Bermuda. So it's a really interesting race. I think it's always won by a good horse because there's so much prize money on offer. At the moment, I think those 3, according to Racing Post ratings, are quite a way ahead of the rest.
Okay. Finally, Niall, would you agree?
Yeah, Signora Cabello probably is the one that catches the eye. I think the one interesting thing that come out of this race was that Signora Cabello beat Gossamer Wings in the Queen Mary by a short head, and Gossamer Wings was then 4th behind Pretty Pollyanna. So if Signora Cabello comes out and runs a good race, it might frank the form a little bit for Pretty Pollyanna.
Yeah, okay. Now, before we move on, Tom, there was a race that you were interested in, wasn't there, that you wanted to give a shout to?
Yeah. There's a new race at Newbury on Saturday. It's called the JLT Cup. It's sort of a race for stayers that is in between the Northumberland Plate and the Ebor, and it's got an incredibly good field in it. And I thought it's worth noting because it's a valuable race. It's a race that will become, I think, a Northumberland Plate or an Ebor in July. Mm-hmm. It's got loads of horses rated 100 in there. It's got 3-year-olds in there, which I think is a crucial point because none of them tend to get in the Northumberland Plate or the Ebor because of how highly they have to be rated. But for example, horses like Making Miracles are entered, and Mark John Gosden's horse Almogared that ran so well in the Queen's Vase. And I think it's going to be a really interesting race because we're going to get the class of the generations over the extended trip, which we don't really get at this stage of the season anymore due to the fact that the Ebor and the Northumberland Plate are early closing races, and it's very hard for the 3-year-olds to get in. So I think it's worth pointing out that the JLT Cup is going to be a race going forward that we'll all be talking about in the same lines as those other two.
Very, very interesting that. Make sure you keep your eye out for that race as Tom's recommended then. Just want to grab a weekend eye catcher or a horse for your RP tracker from each of you if you have one. Neil, I'll go to you first. Any horse really take your eye? You've mentioned a few already at Newmarket.
Yeah, probably the one that I didn't get to mention was Al Hillally. So he, another Charlie Appleby horse, 300,000 guineas Debawi colt. His dam was Ambivalent, who won the Pretty Polly Stakes in 2013. He won the 1610 on Thursday, I think it was, the Weatherby's British Maiden. He was the second string there, missed the break, and won despite being pretty green. He pulled about the front three pulled well clear the rest. The O'Brien horse who finished third, Mount Tabora, went off 5-4 in his first run in the maiden in the Curragh. So it's obviously pretty well thought of, and we're top price at 33s for the 2,000 guineas next year. I just think he's another 2-year-old that Appleby can go to war with, along with Quarto.
Excellent. Tom, a horse from you?
Yeah, Beshayer, Maddie, that won a mile handicap at Ascot for William Haggis off a mark of 88. I think she's probably going to be rated 108 by the end of the season. I thought she was really, really impressive. She ran she dropped her back over 6 furlongs last time in the big handicap, the one won by Encrypted and all those. Foxtrot Lady race. She ran in that. Found 6 furlongs too much for her, but she stepped up to a mile last time and won by 3.5 lengths off a big weight. I think she has got at least £20 still I think she'll be rated 100 and something by the end of the season. She's undoubtedly going to be a group class filly in my book. She beat Foxtrot Lady by miles as a 2-year-old, for example, and we all saw what she did in the week. I think she's really good.
Strong words from Tom. Lewis, anything to match that?
He's not got £20 in hand, but I'll stick with Firmament with that Clipper Logistics handicap at York in mind.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us. That'll be about all for today. Remember, if you enjoy these shows, make sure you rate, review and subscribe to them on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes or any other platform you're listening to us on. Bruce will be back on Friday with an in-depth preview of all the races on ITV and beyond. And you can also tune in to our weekly golf postcast starting on Wednesday, where Bruce and Steve Palmer will look ahead to the Open at Carnoustie. Until next time, goodbye.
Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is ThePaddyPower, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather, or the gym.